I was like, ooh, if I tweak this 1% on this date, I could probably get it within $12. And I ran the numbers. I was like, if I get it right, what's an extra 80 something dollars 30 years from now, tax exempt? It's not worth it. So don't try to over optimize this. Do the best you can.
Welcome to the Military Money Manual Podcast, where every episode is all about achieving financial independence in the military faster than before. We believe personal finance shouldn't be boring or intimidating. Building wealth can be simple, and financial freedom is the ultimate financial goal. Now, here's your hosts, Spencer and Jamie.
When I first joined the Guard, I signed up, raised my right hand, swore the oath. It was middle of August. My first drill was September. So it's the end of the fiscal year. There's no money for uniforms. So I'd been out for 8.5 years at this point. I had already gotten rid of my BDUs. They had already switched to new uniforms. So for the first couple drills, I'm showing up in khakis and a polo shirt. September rolls around, October rolls around, new fiscal year, still no money. Finally, I think it was middle of November, they get uniforms for me and I put it on. First day I put it on, it was great. Good feeling to put it on after 8.5 years of not wearing a uniform. When I first got into the unit, everybody's asking me the 20 questions. Who are you? What do you do? That kind of stuff. And, I've been running the military wallet for, when was this? Probably 7 years at this point. And it's my full-time job. And when you're on active duty and you want to go get another job, you have to get permission from your supervisor and sometimes clear it through ethics and all kinds of things like that. So my website is a military website. I'm not sure what I'm allowed to do because I'm in the Guard, right? Can I have a website about military topics or not? Who should I tell about this? I'm thinking I just want to keep my cards close to the vest. I don't want to tell anybody anything. I'm just Joe Schmo. I just want to be a staff sergeant, cannot, and leave it at that. So they're giving me the 20 questions and all this, and they're like, so what do you do? And I have some websites. And they're like, oh, you build websites. You're a website designer. No, I own the websites. Oh, you build them. I'm like, well, kind of. They're kind of like blogs. They're like, or I didn't even say that at first. I was just kind of not answering, right? And the deeper this goes, it starts, I could see I'm being cagey with my answers because I don't want to tell them everything. And they're like, are you running porn sites? And I'm like, no. So finally I'm like, well, then what do you do? So I said, okay, I have some sites. They're about money and helping people get out of debt and doing the right thing. And they're like, what's it called? I said, I have a couple of them. And they're like, give us the website names. So I'm like, okay, one of them is called Cash Money Life and the other is called the Military Wallet. And I swear to God, guy's name was Ryan also. It's kind of funny. He jumps up, points at me and screams like, you're the Military Wallet? I just throw my hands up in the air. I'm like, yes, I am.
Busted. I've always wondered that. It's interesting because you have senators, congressmen that are in the Guard or reserves, and they have this balance of one day they're in a uniform as a 05 and the next day they're yelling at the 4 stars. Yeah. So what was the end result of, that's your full-time job. It's good. You just don't do it while you're on orders over the weekend.
Yeah, it was actually, the response was really positive. I've always been very clear not to associate my day job with being in the military. So I don't want to promote my website or anything like that anytime I'm in uniform. But I've actually had people come up to me and say, hey, I heard your podcast. Like the second, third drills, I was over there. I remember I'm a staff sergeant. I'm brand new. A captain turns around in the chow hall line, looks at me. He's like, hey, you got that website, don't you? And I'm like, oh, gosh, is this guy public affairs or something? Like, am I in trouble now? And I said, yes, sir. And he said, keep up the good work. I'm like, okay. So it was always really positive. I actually was able to do a few things with the unit, put on some seminars about investing or like life insurance, SGLI, things like that. I actually remember when COVID was first kicking off, I had already been scheduled to do a talk to, we call it the Rising Five, so it's E1 to E5, about investing or just talking about money management. And I said, hey, this COVID thing is happening. You're going to see the stock market drop and it's going to be brutal, but don't do anything different. Just keep your money in there and eventually it'll come back. And oh my gosh, it did. It was one of those things where just being able to help people and have that impact has been really good. But at the same time, like I said, I didn't go give these talks to people and say, and go check out my website. I was very clear not to do anything like that. And to be clear, I no longer own or operate the Military Wallet. I am involved with it a little bit, but as a contractor, but it's all run by another company and they're doing a great job. I love what they do, but yeah, I don't have that connection there anymore.
And correct me if I'm wrong, Ryan, but you started the Military Wallet while you were in active duty, right?
No, actually it was right after I got out. So I left active duty in early 06. Here's the thing about the military, right? And what I love about the military and finances is they keep it as simple as they can for you, right? So you have the TSP, which has ostensibly 5 investment options, right? You can do, life cycle funds, but it's just a combination of those. It's basically everything that you need to have a well-balanced portfolio, but none of the stuff you don't need. It's made as simple as possible. Life insurance, you have one option. Healthcare, you have TRICARE. Your BAH is designed to tell you, here's approximately how much you can spend on housing. BAS, this is approximately how much you can spend on food. So it makes it easy for budgeting, understanding what your options are. It's all geared toward readiness. Now, when you leave the military, and Spencer, you know this, life is different. How much can I spend on my housing? When you get a job with a civilian company and your 401k has 40 investment options, and if you don't know anything about index funds, which at the time I didn't, things are very convoluted. Healthcare, I think my company, my first job out of the military had like 5 or 6 health insurance options, like PPOs, HMOs, and then within there you could choose different deductibles per month and all of that. Health insurance, life insurance is on your own. You have to find all those things. So what I ended up doing was reading everything that I could on personal finance, investing, health insurance, life insurance, everything. I became a blog junkie when blogs were still really new. This is 2006 time frame. I got out of the military. I moved across the country. I got married pretty much right away. And it was, okay, I got to learn about mortgages, all these things. I was reading everything I could, and I found these blogs that were just run by individuals. Nowadays, everybody's got a YouTube channel and a podcast or their own website or, social media, all those things. But we're talking close to 20 years ago, things were very different. So I decided to start my own website. I started one called Cash Money Life, and that one's no longer around. That was actually combined with Military Wallet. A lot of those articles were combined there to add more context and information on that website. But I also realized that I started writing more articles about the military. So things like using the VA loan, VA disability benefits, education benefits, because I was looking at going back and maybe getting an MBA or something like that. And in the 2006, 7, 8 timeframe, the VA website was pretty terrible. Now they've come a long way. It's really good now. There's a lot of great information. It's very easy to navigate. Back then it was not. I basically just started blogging, and I made a lot of friends and started writing articles and content and started getting some traction. And it's funny. I started this with the intent of, I want to document what I learn, and I hope I can make some money. And my goal was to, hey, let's make $50, $100 a month so I can take my wife out on a date night and feel good about contributing to something, and we can have a free date night and not worry about it. And then the stretch goal, I didn't know if it's even possible, was to, hey, if I can make a mortgage payment, I can live for free. You're still working on the side, but you've got that extra money coming in, you can do that. And it took me 7 months to make any money. Make my first $100 took 7 months. After that, I made at least $100 every month. So I started in March of that year. I made about $1,500 that first year. That second, the first full year, I think I made about $40,000. It was amazing. And then every year after that, I basically started matching my day job income. And then we had my wife and I had our daughter, and she wanted to be a stay-at-home mom instead of continuing working, and said, yeah, let's do it. And then eventually I was like, you know what? I'm going to do this with you, and quit the day job and started running my website full time. And that would have been in February of 2010. So yeah, it's been 15 years. It's been fun.
Wow. And you were not in the Guard at that point yet. So you went from active duty, a period of work in civilian workplace, a period of work on the website only, and then decided to go back into the Guard eventually.
The story behind that was when I got my first job out of the military, I worked as a civilian contractor at headquarters AFMC at Wright-Patterson. So that's Air Force Materiel Command, where they run all of logistics. So I went from aircraft maintenance, turning wrenches, to talking about the supply line. So it was language that I knew and I understood. I learned a lot of things there. I was able to contribute and still be part of that military community. I worked directly for a major who was there and all the civilian, civil service workers and everything. So it was good to be part of that community. And then when I became self-employed, we decided, hey, you know what? Let's leave Ohio and move to Illinois because that's where my wife's family is. And we just picked up and moved. We didn't really research it. We just said, hey, you know what? We're just going to do it. And we did. And it was good to have that experience, to be near my in-laws, and so my daughters could know their grandparents and aunts and uncles and cousins and things like that. And that part was good, but we lost that community, and it was difficult moving away from our church and our friends and still feeling part of that military community. And after a while, I just realized something is missing in my life. And it took me a long time to realize what it was. And it was a sense of purpose, but more than that, it was just a sense of that community. And, even though I was running the military wallet and active in that community and helping veterans and still giving back, I felt that I was drifting further and further from the military community because I was no longer involved in it. And I just started feeling not like an imposter, but just like so much is changing and I'm not part of it. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized, I can't go back on active duty. I want to still be here and watch my kids grow up. And I want to be able to, work from home and see that. And I've been so blessed to be able to work from home while they've been growing up. That's the only thing they've ever known. But I missed that bigger purpose. So I looked into it, and it ended up taking me over a year to join. I had to get some medical waivers because I had like a knee surgery on active duty and I had a VA disability rating on that. And that part was a pain, but I got back in, and that brings us full circle to the beginning of this podcast, like when I joined and all that. But joining the Guard was good. I was out for 8.5 years, but it was amazing to come back in. I've been in the Guard now for about 10.5 years now. So I had 6.5 on active duty. So I'm at 17.5 years right now, total service time. So even though I'm a little older, I enlisted in 1999, I'm still not retirement eligible yet. That's my story.
Can you describe how that process worked for the VA disability? Well, first you had to get a waiver for certain items you mentioned. How did that work? And then you get VA disability check, except for when you're drilling and on orders or deployed, that money pauses?
Yeah, that's a great question. So anybody who's looking at joining the Guard or Reserves, like if you're prior active duty, sometimes a recruiter may tell you you're ineligible because you have a VA disability rating. That is not necessarily true. It can be true depending on your rating or what the condition is. It's all case by case. If you're leaving directly from active duty into the Guard or Reserves, it's pretty seamless, and it's very rare for them to say no because of a medical reason you can't do it. If you're getting medically separated from active duty, they may do it at that point, but otherwise it's pretty seamless. Basically what they're looking at is, are you worldwide deployable? Can you do your job? Are there any physical limitations for your job? And can you pass your physical fitness test? So let's say I had knee surgery on both of my knees. They were arthroscopic surgeries. And when I applied to join the Guard, I got a letter back from MEPS, and they said, nope, you have a permanent disqualification, a PDQ, because you've had knee surgeries. Well, a PDQ, it means a permanent disqualification. It doesn't mean you're permanently disqualified from joining. It means you have a permanent medical condition. You can't undo a surgery, right? So that's a permanent condition. Now, let's say I had a broken finger. MEPS could say, well, you can't join because your finger's broken, but your finger can heal. So if you apply, that would be a temporary one, right? Your finger heals, you come back in. So that's kind of what they're looking at. So it is possible. And then as you alluded to, Jamie, yes, when I'm drilling and on military duty, I don't receive VA disability compensation on those days. So what the VA does, they just pay it out for the whole month. And then at the end of the year, they send you a letter and it says, hey, you received 60 days of military compensation during the year. We're going to withhold 60 days of compensation from you going forward, or you can write us a check for the balance. That's kind of how it works. The simplified version.
And does the VA keep track of that based on the DMDC database, or like how are they reconciling?
DFAS and the VA touch databases together and they look at it.
Yep.
And DFAS says he was paid this many days, and the VA says, okay, we'll send him a letter. And that's the way they do it. Now, I've had my letter I've been in for 10 years now. It's correct almost every time, but they can make some mistakes. One year I filled out the paperwork. It was really easy to do, and they fixed it. The other time they were off by 3 days. And I just was like, the amount of time it's going to take for me to correct this is probably not worth it. So they withheld 3 additional days of compensation from me. So it's prorated on a monthly basis. So if you're making $300 a month, they withhold $30. Wasn't worth my time to fill out the paperwork. But the other time it was.
I'm so curious about the Guard stuff, because I'm one that, I think other listeners would agree with this, that have said before, I wish someone would have told me about the Guard when I was 18 or 20 before joining RTC. Now it's a lot easier to go from Air Force RTC into the Air National Guard, for example. But I think it's also kind of scary because there's unknowns that people don't talk about much. And one of those is maybe healthcare. Do you, as a part-timer, what's the healthcare like? Are you still eligible for TRICARE? And especially for our community that's looking at maybe early retirement, how could the Guard be a good option to help have some healthcare options without having to work full-time or go sling coffee at Starbucks?
Hey, great questions. I do get my health care through the Guard. So I mentioned I've been self-employed for 15 years now. So I don't have a company that's going to offer me health insurance or, give me some kind of discount on that. So before I joined the Guard, keep in mind, this was back in 2013, 14 timeframe. We were already paying about $1,100 a month for our health insurance then. Now, this is for a family of 4 with no pre-existing health conditions. We had a high deductible healthcare plan, so we could use the savings account you can get with that, the HSA. So even with all of that, we were paying so much, and we had max out of pocket of, I think, $6,500 a person or $13,000 for the family. So on top of the $1,000 a month that you're paying or higher, you're still potentially on the hook for another $13,000 or so. It was very expensive. Now, joining the Guard, you can get healthcare through the TRICARE Reserve Select plan, which is good. For an individual, it's roughly $50 a month. For family, it's about $250 a month. So that's actually very affordable. It's very inexpensive copays, very low max out of pocket. My family and I have been using that for the last 10 years. It's been amazing for us. Anytime you're activated, you go onto TRICARE active duty. We're a remote because there's no active duty base near us. So it'll be TRICARE standard is what we're on right now. And then if you deploy, like I deployed in 2023, so you had a little bit of lead up time to that where we were on TRICARE, the active duty TRICARE while I was deployed. And then when I came back, they put you on the Transition Assistance Management Program, TAMP. And that was an additional 6 months of health care for free on top of that. In fact, I did a 3-month remote tour last summer working on a project with the Pentagon. So I got to work from home, do work remotely. It was great. Got active duty TRICARE for that. And then when I came off, because of the type of orders I was on, they put me on TAMP. So I'm just now finishing an additional 6 months of health care for free. So it is a great option for those who are looking at healthcare or looking for something more affordable, where you're leaving active duty, you need some kind of transition there. It's worked out really well. Now, when you retire, you're eligible for TRICARE Reserve Select or TRICARE Retiree Reserve, and you no longer get the discount there. So instead of paying $250 a month for a family, it's like $1,500 or $1,600 a month. So it becomes very expensive at that point because it's no longer subsidized by the government, but it still can be a very good option. Pay in healthcare for Guard and Reserve retirees starts at age 60. So some people will work until age 60 because that's what they want to do. Others, they may say, hey, once I hit my 20, I'm done. And you have to figure out how you're going to bridge that gap with healthcare. Some people might be able to get it through, a spouse's employment. They might just pay out of pocket. They might go on the Affordable Care Act, buy a plan there. They can get it through TRICARE Retiree Reserve. There's a lot of different options there. You just got to really figure out what works best for you and your family.
Were there any challenges coming back after such a long break, like with fitness standards or medical stuff, or I know it's the Guard, so there's some oldies there, but did you feel like the old man in the mountain coming back after a couple of years?
Yeah, so there are a lot of challenges. I'll tell you personally, like when I got out of active duty, I had back-to-back knee surgeries. My knees were tore up from my time on active duty. And I actually had a surgery and got out like a month and a half later. And when I went to my healthcare exit interview, the doctor said, what are you doing? I said, I'm getting out. I need you to sign my paperwork. I wasn't snide like that. He was a captain on his staff, yeah. But he was like, I can't sign this. It's like, why not? He said, you just had surgery. You need to have like 6 months recovery time before I can sign this. I said, oh, okay. Well, can you extend me? No. Oh, so then sign the papers, And he just looked at me and he signed it, but it was like he was almost looking away as he did it. So he signed the paperwork. Yeah. I didn't know this stuff. How am I supposed to know what the rules are, stuff like that? They authorized it, so I did it. The point is my knees were pretty tore up, so I just didn't run again, right? So 8.5 years later, I'm joining the Guard, and I have to start running again because I got to do a PT test. Man, I'll tell you, I started so slow. It was a quarter mile I could do before I was out of breath. Now I can go run a couple miles. It's not a big deal. I'm 45 years old and I can go run a couple miles, but there I was 35. I could barely run at all. That part it took me a while to get back up to it. My fitness is actually good. And that's one of the benefits of sticking around in the guard is it gives me accountability there, right? So I have to maintain a certain level, a certain standard of fitness. No, guard folks, people will give you a bad rap but there's so many great people out there.
You've got this great article on, well, it's not your website anymore, but the militarywallet.com, of which you are quite affiliated with, has this great article on how to maximize TSP contributions in a combat zone, which I think was originally written by Doug Nordman and moved from his site, if I remember.
Yeah, I think Doug and I probably both wrote an article on the topic, and we may have chosen his if his was better, or probably just merged the two articles.
Yeah.
Just a quick note from one of our sponsors, and we'll be right back to the show. Hey, Spencer, I've heard about this free Amex Platinum card for military service members. Where can I go to learn more about this?
Great question, Jamie. I've got the Ultimate Military Credit Cards course at militarymoneymanual.com/UMC3. It's a 100% free email-based course, and I explain exactly how to verify your eligibility for credit card annual fee waivers with the Military Lending Act, or MLA, and the Service Members Civil Relief Act, or SCRA. The Ultimate Military Credit Cards course is a beginner's guide to travel hacking and opening up your first annual fee-waived credit card while you or your spouse serves in the U.S. military. There's no spam, no fluff, and the only emails you'll get from me are related to military credit cards. You can unsubscribe at any time, and there's zero cost to you to sign up. You can sign up right now for free at militarymoneymanual.com/UMC3. Again, militarymoneymanual.com/uniform Mike Charlie 3.
And now back to the show.
Yeah, Doug's great. How do you maximize it? So there's a couple cool things about that. So what is the max this year? Is it 24, 25,000? I don't know what it is for the TSP.
So officially the 2025 numbers, and go to, if you want to look this up, tsp.gov, and then contribution limits is where to go. 23,500 is the elective deferral limit, and then 70,000 is the annual additions limit. So those are the two numbers we'll deal with this year, 23.5 and 70K.
When you're in the deployed zone, so you're earning tax-exempt pay, right? So you're not paying tax on anything. You have the amazing benefit to put money into the Roth TSP that's not taxed coming out of your paycheck, grows tax-free forever, and then you pull it out tax-free. That's a triple tax-exempt bonus. Like, the military is the only people in the world that I know that have that opportunity. It's amazing. However, once you hit that 23,500 limit in your Roth, it completely shuts off your contributions for the rest of the year. So what you want to do is maximize it. If you can, put up to $70,000 into your TSP in a calendar year. How does that work? Okay, so you have what's called the annual addition limit. That goes up to $70,000. The way that works is any money that's going into the traditional TSP while you're deployed counts toward the annual addition limit. Anything that you put into the Roth counts towards your $23,500 limit. So if you want to maximize things, you can put up to $23,500 into your Roth, but once you hit $23,500, it shuts it off and you can no longer put toward the annual addition limit. The way I did it is I built a spreadsheet and I said, okay, I'm going to make it. Unfortunately, the TSP doesn't allow you to do exact dollar amounts. You have to do a percentage of your pay, which makes things a little bit challenging. You have to figure it out by month and go to the finance office, or you can do it on the website and do it that way. I just figured out what it would be for the time I was deployed. I was on a 6-month deployment. I divided the money and I said, okay, I don't want to hit or exceed $23,500 over that time period. So I wish I had the spreadsheet in front of me, but whatever it was, you put 11% of your pay or 15 or 23 or whatever percent it is, you break it up bi-monthly, and then you see how close you can get to that $23,500 without exceeding it. Anything else that you want to put toward the annual addition limit goes into your traditional TSP. That goes toward the $70,000 limit. I'm very blessed, and I understand not everybody can maximize or exceed the $23,500. I was in a situation where we had income coming in from my spouse's job and from my business at the time. So we were living off of that money, and my deployment money, I just put 100% of it into the TSP and, whatever I could. So I understand that doesn't apply to everybody, but if you can make it happen, that's how you do it. So as much as you can into the Roth so that you don't exceed the $23,500, and then anything above that goes into the traditional as long as you don't exceed $70,000. Now, I'm in the old retirement, the high 36 plan. So I don't have to worry about any matching contributions from the military. If you're in the blended retirement system, you have the matching contributions from the military. So you may have to drag out your contributions in such a way that you allow for those matching contributions to get you all the way through to December. So you're going to have to really spreadsheet this out and figure out, okay, while I'm deployed, I can do X amount. When I come off deployment, I can only do this. And you're going to have to leave some room in that $23,500 to at least get that 5% matching from the government. Because once you hit that $23,500, it shuts off all future contributions. If you're not contributing, you're not going to be able to get that matching from the government. And then the last part of that is once you come back from the deployed zone, those traditional contributions that were going to your annual addition limit, once you get out of that tax exempt pay, those now start counting towards your $23,500. So you really have to balance that out and work on spreadsheets. And it's one of those things that if you can get a second set of eyes to help you run those numbers, that'll definitely be better.
I was just going to clarify because that sounds very confusing and definitely something DFAS would get perfect the first time. So you have to, let's say you just happen to deploy January through July, just to make it easy, like 1 January to 1 July. You're approaching the end of your deployment. You're putting as much as you can up to 23.5 without going over into Roth because of the triple tax advantage you mentioned. And then you have to switch your contributions to traditional before it goes over. So you can still contribute the rest of the year. It just is all going to be traditional dollars. Is that what I'm hearing?
You cannot exceed $23,500 between your Roth TSP and any traditional contributions made outside of the zone. So any traditional contributions made while you're in the tax exempt zone count toward the annual addition limit. Anything made outside of the tax exempt zone and all Roth count toward the $23,500. So when, if you go from January to, July 1, all of that, all your Roth counts towards the 23.5. All your traditional counts towards your up to the 70. Anything after July 1, all of that counts towards your $23,500 limit. If you're in the BRS and you want to have matching contributions from July 1 to December 31, you need to leave room in that $23,500 so that you can contribute your 5% per month and still get that matching contribution from the TSP. It can get a little tricky.
One thing that makes this easier, though, is because as long as we're talking calendar year, dollars are fungible inside that calendar year. So what I mean by that is you don't have to get the combat zone dollars into the Roth account because those combat zone dollars aren't being added to your taxable income. So even if you contribute Roth, you contribute from your pay in September, right? Which is let's say you're deployed from January 1st to June 30th or July 1st, whatever you want to say. And now you're contributing when you get back to home station. You're not getting tax-free pay anymore. You can keep making Roth contributions, and it's essentially the same as if you had contributed combat zone dollars because all those months of pay are just not taxed. And so it doesn't matter if you put combat zone dollars in there or tax dollars in there, as long as it's in that calendar year that you were tax-free. But the gotcha is what you've been talking about, Ryan, is for the traditional limit, the annual additional limit, you have to contribute to your traditional, or if you contribute to your traditional TSP account while you're in a combat zone, it's going to count against your annual additional limit. It's not going to count against your $23,500 limit. And Jamie, to your point with like DFAS getting this perfectly right the first time, if I was doing the strategy, I would turn off my traditional contribution. If I knew I was coming back in home station or I was leaving the combat zone in July, I would turn off my traditional TSP contribution probably May and give the DFAS computers 2 months to cut off the traditional TSP contribution. Does that make sense to you, Ryan, to just give yourself some time there to stop contributing?
You can talk to the finance office and they can help you with the dates. I think it was roughly 3 weeks between making a change and seeing it. So it depends when on the pay cycle you put it in. So yeah, at least a month is what you want to look at. 2 months would be safer. The other thing is don't try to do this too finely. When I looked at it, I got my Roth up to, within $100 of that $23,500 limit. I was like, ooh, if I tweak this 1% on this date, I could probably get it within $12. And I ran the numbers. I was like, if I get it right, what's an extra $80-something 30 years from now, tax exempt? It's not worth it. So don't try to over-optimize this. Do the best you can. The other thing, and this only applies to Guard members, you have to be very, very careful with this. So active and reserves have a pay system that codes you as tax-free or tax-exempt on your LES. So when you get paid, they're paying you all your tax, like they're not withholding any taxes or anything like that. You're tax exempt. It's great. For the Guard, it doesn't work that way. They withhold your taxes, then reimburse them the next month. And then they go and tell DFAS and the TSP the next month, oh, by the way, they were tax exempt. So what happened to me is while I was putting all this money into the Roth, I hit my limit and it shut off my TSP. Well, what was happening is they were paying me, they were withholding my taxes, everything goes into the TSP. Then after the fact, they say, okay, next month, here's your taxes back. And then, okay, TSP, by the way, that's tax exempt. When I hit that $23,500 limit, the TSP said, you're done. And they rejected all future contributions. Well, DFAS didn't know about this. So DFAS ended up withholding an additional, like it was close to $15,000 of mine that should have gone into the TSP. On my LES, it shows, hey, this money is going to the TSP. It's great. I set up my TSP right when I was deployed because as self-employed, I was just paying into my solo 401k. It's easier to have one retirement plan than it is to try to balance out and maximize between two, especially when you can only contribute a percentage, right? I didn't really log into my TSP account while I was out there. I just assumed, hey, LES says it's good, it's good. I got back in July, did a family vacation, did some other things. Then I went back and started updating my spreadsheets and looking at things. I'm like, my TSP account seems really light. What's going on here? And I started doing some digging and investigating. I'm like, oh, this is not good. I'm missing like $15,000. What's going on? So this was September of 2023. I was changing units in Guard. I just transferred within the state. So I was in Memphis, Tennessee. Now I'm in Nashville, Tennessee. So I noticed this in September. I contacted the TSP. TSP said, you have to run this through your finance office. And I learned something new. The Air Force is the only branch of the military that cannot contact anybody at DFAS. There's no physical way to do it. Army, Marines, Navy, they have a number they can call and talk to somebody. We don't. So I put in a help desk ticket through the Air Force. The Air Force said, you got to run this through your finance office at the base. I was changing bases. So I'm like, you know what? I'm going to wait till October when I change bases because I don't want to work with my old base. Too difficult. So October of 23 is when I put in a what they call a case management system, CMS case, with DFAS to try to figure this out. And it was, so October to what is now, we're talking 14, 15 months. I just now got this resolved, I think in January. We're talking well over a year of going back and forth with my finance office, the TSP and DFAS. And the problem with the DFAS is it's a black box. Nobody knows what's going on. The finance office on the base level can't talk to anybody at DFAS also. They have to put it into that CMS case. And you type in the situation, they give you like a 2-line response saying, here's what it is. It's just very, very convoluted. The short of it is, if you're in the Guard, you have to really, really be careful how you're doing these contributions. So hopefully what happened to me doesn't happen to you.
Do they back pay you the 15 grand plus interest? Or like, are you just out all the gains on that money?
No, actually, that was the beautiful part of it. And I'm just very grateful. They went back and realized, yes, this was a mistake. He did everything he was supposed to do. So they actually went back and looked at the books and they could tell based on when the contribution should have hit. And I don't have the terminology in front of me, but it was, they put the money in there and then there was an extra line. I'd have to log in and see what it says. But yes, they made up for it. It's just like gains of what it would have been essentially. So I was very pleased with that. And because we're still talking, 2023, the stock market was just still really, really climbing. It was like an extra $1,000 or so that they made good on. So it worked out in my favor. And I'm sure if I would have lost money, they would have corrected that too. And that's fine. The stock market works both ways. But I was grateful for that. It's a great question.
Okay, I have to just reattack one thing, Ryan, for the slow kids like me. So as long as I don't hit 23.5 while I'm deployed, I come back in July, I can continue to make traditional contributions for the rest of the year up to the 70,000 this year, up to the annual. You're done.
So the way it works is 23,500 is the max anybody can contribute to the TSP unless you're deployed, right? And then you have that annual addition limit. Now, the annual addition limit is 70,000, but it doesn't mean you get 70,000 on top of your 23.5. It's actually the delta between those, right? the way that works, any traditional TSP contributions, when you're deployed, they only count toward that annual addition limit. Roth count toward the 23.5. Once you get out of that deployed zone, everything counts toward that 23.5. So if you're going to try to make it from July until December, in our hypothetical deployment, you need to leave at least 5% of your pay per month to get you all the way to December. So, depending on what your rank is, you might only want to put in like $18,000 or $20,000 toward that Roth while you're deployed. Then you're going to leave that few $1,000s and just put your limit at 5. Now, you could do that as Roth when you get back. You could do it as traditional. You could do a combination. That part doesn't matter. It's just outside of that deployment zone, you have 23.5 total for the whole year.
I think one thing that you could do here, Jamie, and maybe the way I would do it if I was playing, and I just thought about this, so poke holes in it if it doesn't make sense, but I was just looking at the TSP Max Contribution 2025 chart that I've got on militarymoneymanual.com, and let's take an 04 with over 10 years of service. Okay, so 22% is what they would have to contribute January through December every month, 22% to max out the 23,500 by the end of the year. So you could set 22% and then you would make the 23,500 by the end of the year. While you were in the combat zone, you could go crazy and do as much percentage as you wanted into the traditional up to the $70,000 limit, and then just make sure you turn it off before you get back to home station, and then you just keep making regular Roth contributions throughout the year. So that's a scenario in which you're deployed January through July of, let's say, 6 months of the year. If you're deployed the entire year, which happens to some people, then it just makes the math a lot easier, except, again, you're still restricted to the 23.5 Roth limit. Once you hit that, even if you're in a combat zone.
Yeah, it shuts the whole thing. Yeah, that's what happened to me, because it was supposed to be tax exempt, but they were making it tax exempt after the fact. To your point, Jamie, if it's 22% of your pay for the whole year, you could do Roth at 22%, set that in January, leave it without doing anything else. And then anything else that you can put toward traditional, just do that. I mean, that would be perfect if you can swing it. Now, we're probably talking to a minority of people who can do it. We understand some of your listeners are just getting started in their financial journey, or they might be lower ranking and not be able to do that. But that's great. Like, we're all working from a different position, and we're all starting somewhere. So wherever you're starting from and wherever you're going, as long as you're moving in the right direction, this is great.
We had an episode a couple of months ago where we really encouraged, because of the unique military tax benefits of our pay, that everyone should probably be looking at Roth if they're military, except for a couple of unique circumstances. We talked through some caveats in the episode. When someone's deployed, is there any reason you can think of to not do Roth and take advantage of that triple tax benefit that you mentioned? Are there any outliers on that, or is that just pretty black? Is that as black and white as personal finance comes?
It is for deployment, right? Because you're earning money that's not taxed. It's going into a retirement fund where it's not going to be taxed when it grows, and then you pull it out and it's not taxed. Like, it's just triple tax. There is no other triple tax benefit like that. The only thing that would say, rein this in a little bit is if you're trying to avoid, maxing out that 23.5 for the year. But Spencer did with that perfectly simple, do your 22% Roth the whole year and throw everything extra in the traditional. So the Roth is the way to go. And then if you can put in anything else, put in the traditional. Absolutely.
Ryan, you mentioned earlier about the desire to serve and something bigger than yourself that brought you back into the Guard. Now that you're approaching 20 good years, what are the considerations for how Guard retirement works? And you mentioned a little bit about healthcare already and not collecting retirement right away. What might keep you to stay in a little bit longer past 20 versus getting out? And what are the differences between an active duty retirement like I'm focused on right now compared to what you might be looking at?
That's a great question. And, this is a huge topic. I could talk about this for hours. It's probably, worthy of its own podcast. In this sense, active duty, you do your 20, you retire. That next month, your pay starts. You transition immediately into your retired healthcare plan. And really, there's no gaps in any of your pay or benefits. In the Guard and Reserves, when you retire, you don't get your healthcare or your retirement pay until age 60. Now, there is early retirement pay that can kick in as early as age 50, depending on deployments and certain things like that. But healthcare still doesn't kick in until age 60. It's not uncommon to see Guard members serve until their 50s, sometimes up until they turn 60, partly because their civilian job might be tied to it, because you have a civil service member whose job is tied to their military service, or some people it's because they want the pay and benefits. Some people just love being part of that community. So a lot of people stick around for a long time. As for myself, I'll be at the position where I'll be retirement eligible in about 2.5, 3 years. Now, I'm due, hopefully, eligible for major soon. So part of that is, okay, I want to retire as a major. They'll put that little carrot out there and maybe try to keep you around a little longer and say, what happens if you make lieutenant colonel? So then you balance those things and say, what do you want your retirement to pay to be, or your, the ID card and all that fun stuff. For me, it's, do I feel fulfilled? Do I feel challenged? Do I feel like I'm contributing? Does this work with my lifestyle, with my family? Am I able to balance all of that? Those are the considerations that I'm going to look into more so than, do I need to earn more points for my retirement? Do I need to earn additional retirement pay? For me, it's more of quality of life. And, as long as I'm feeling fulfilled, as long as I feel like I'm contributing and I'm a part of it, and we can do that work-life balance, then I'll hang around. What that looks like for me, I don't know. It could be another 3 years as soon as I'm eligible, or I might stick around another 10. I don't know. But I just want to have that flexibility and that ability to say, I'm ready. I've served. I'm done. And for everybody, it's different. But those are the big differences. Retirement from active duty, you earn your retirement pay and healthcare. It's instant. And then Guard and Reserves, it waits until age 60. You can still access the bases, and you can do space-safe flights as a retiree and things like that. The biggest, the pay and the healthcare.
That's a lot of details in there. Probably worthy of its own episode. Maybe we can have you back sometime soon to talk specifically about Guard and Reserve retirement.
I'd be happy to. It'd be a lot of fun.
That'd be awesome. Well, Ryan, thanks so much for chatting with us today about the military wallet, your website, your business that you started shortly after separating, investing in the TSP while deployed, and some of the nuances, especially for the Guard. There's definitely some gotchas there, especially for people who listen to this podcast, the super savers out there who are able to not only max their elective deferral limit for the year, but even go above that, and maybe even get close to the $70,000 limit in 2025. Joining the Guard after a long break. It was great to hear your personal story, but we'll definitely have you back on the show soon to talk military, Guard, Reserve retirement. That's definitely a gap for Jamie and me, so we need to bring an expert back on to chat about it.
Happy to do it. Spencer, JB, it's a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much for tuning in to this episode of the Military Money Manual podcast. If you're enjoying the show, please feel free to rate, subscribe, and leave a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. This helps others find the show, and we really appreciate it. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll catch you in the next episode.
The views and opinions presented here are those of the speakers and do not necessarily represent the views of the DoD or its components. Reference to any commercial products or services does not constitute DoD endorsement of those products or services.